Assalamu alaikum class. I'm your teacher, Ma'am Sanab. Today we are going to discuss must, should, and ought. I welcome you all in my class, and today we are going to discuss these words which are very important to know. Why? Because we generally use these words in our conversation. Okay, you can notice me too. You can notice other people who are talking to you in English, or during their conversation you will find out that they generally or commonly use must, should, and ought. Not ought. Okay, ought is something else which I will show you later on in my last slide. Okay, first of all we have to move to our first topic, that is must. Okay, here here can you see the word must? First of all, use of must, right? So you use must in a sentence where there is a necessity. It is used in the sentence where something is compulsory to say. Okay, and when someone wants to give you an order, like you must follow the rules of a class, you must follow the instructions of your teacher, so there they will use must. Okay, which means that something which is compulsory or which is important to do. Okay, fine, then at that time you will use must. For example, she must be at the freshers party, which means that must be shows that she must come here. Okay, so must shows that something is compulsory. But next our concept is related to should. Should is the word which we regularly use in our language without knowing what we are saying, and it's very common. How? For example, when your teacher wants to suggest you something, or give when she wants to give you an advice, okay, then she will use should. Or when your senior, when your brother or any other person, when he wants to give a suggestion, give an advice, so he will use should over there. Okay, for example, you should be telling the truth. Sorry, he should be telling the truth, which means that something which is only a suggestion, not a compulsion. Okay, so the next thing is ought to. Our next concept is ought to. Ought to is different than should. How? I must say that ought to is the word which is in between the must and should. Because, and how? Because ought to shows that something is important and something needs to be advised to someone, but it is not compulsion. Okay, this is not compulsory to do, but it is important to do. For example, we will see examples later on. Okay, for example, you ought to listen carefully. Okay, you ought to listen carefully. We ought to leave now. Fine, so something which is important to do by the society. So can you find out the difference between these three words? First one is must, should, and ought to. Must shows the compulsion, should show the advice or suggestion or normal word, and the third one is ought to, which shows that something is important but not an order. Okay, move to the next one where you can see the examples. Okay, look at the examples. Here is the example of must and should. Fine, we must fasten our seat belt. You must stop playing computer games. Okay, when your mother wants to give you an instruction like stop playing the computer games, so she can say you must stop playing computer games. Okay, fine, so must shows the compulsion. Or she must learn to drive. For driving a car, you must learn how to drive it. So at that time you will use must where something is very compulsory to do. Okay, now the next thing, as I told you, is should, which is related to suggestion, which is related to an advice. So you should apply for that job. If I want to say to someone that yes, you are very capable, your abilities are very good, go ahead, so I will say you should apply for that job. You should apply for that job. Other one is, you have sore throat, you shouldn't drink cold water. Okay, you shouldn't means if you are saying something in a negative sentence. Okay, there should be a way to do something. Michael should keep out of the sun for 2 days, which means here is the suggestions and advice and probable expression, not an order. Fine, but move to the next one. Oops, sorry. Ought to. Now move toward the examples of ought to. Ought to is also an advice, but which is in between, right? So, which is important. I said to you, an advice which is important, okay? You ought to revise your lessons. Margaret ought to exercise more. Our team ought to win this match for today, okay? Ought to means it's important to do. She ought to receive the package tonight. Fine, but ought to not usually used in questions or negative sentences. Clear? Very good. Okay, this is the major difference between should and ought to. You must remember that. Okay, first one is should is more commonly used. I told you already that should is more important and more common one. Done. Second thing is should used in both spoken and written language, but ought to used in written language only. Fine. We can't use ought to. We can, but we generally not. Okay. So it's only in a written language. Should expresses a subjective opinion. Expresses a subjective opinion, which means that opinion of a person, but ought to expresses an objective view. Objective view means that something which is acceptable by the society, okay, which is important, as written over here. See, expresses the accepted view in the society, and the other one is expresses the personal view of the speaker. So should is showing in a subjective opinion, whereas ought to is expresses an objective view or opinion. So these words are very important to know. You must learn and you must remember these words in your mind, okay? While during your conversation, you know where and how to use these words. Fine. There is no too much theory to remember in these words. Just remember the use of it, where to apply this word and where to apply this one. Your all work is here related to your language. Fine. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you understand what I said to you. Please practice your language on daily basis. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.